So I don't want to say launches before weren't as competitive. I think you had different tools that you needed to utilize during that launch. So if you are someone that has been producing campaigns for the same offer, or maybe you've tried launching something new or repeated launches for your signature offer, you're doing the same things, you're doing the same sales activities, and you're wondering why it's not producing the results that you want. And you really want to focus on that next record-breaking launch, whether it's for an existing signature offer that you have, or maybe it's something new that you're creating. Here are 5 things that I recommend currently for your next sold out campaign. So I think before, what you used to have to focus on is just making sure that everyone knew about the offer. Everyone knew the details of the offer and everyone just had the information. If they had the information, if they knew what the transformation was, they would be ready to buy. But I think the number one thing you need to focus on during a campaign is having a campaign theme, having a launch theme. This is also what helps position your offer as new and fresh and exciting, even if you launch multiple times a year. I think currently what's happening is buyers are just getting smarter. They're picking up on cues. They're learning when people launch, they're probably going to open enrollment again. They're probably going to open cart again. And so if you're someone that's launching multiple times a year to your entire audience with the same signature offer, what's going to happen is people are going to start picking up on the cues that this is the same offer and over again. But what you can do is make it different and come up with a launch theme. I think a lot about big brands like Skim that really sell the same product over and over again, but they bring in new models, they come up with new campaign themes, they think of new creative ideas, they do new photo shoots. Overall, they find ways to make the same old product new and exciting again. And so even if someone didn't buy from their last campaign, it's something that they're selling over and over again. And so maybe that one collab will get someone to buy. Maybe that one anchor in the theme or the messaging of it will get someone to buy. They find different ways to bring people back to the same signature product that they have. So I have a whole resource about how to come up with your campaign theme, but I want you to think about how you can come up with a creative theme for your campaign and then make sure the visuals, the messaging, the copy, the series of content that you're going to do, the marketing ideas that you come up with all tie in with that one theme, because that's what's going to make the campaign itself memorable. That's what's going to get the attention not only of people that are new to your audience, but even existing people that have watched you launch this over and over again. That new theme can pick them right back up. The next thing is a re-engagement period. Now, a re-engagement period can be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks where you are spending time just connecting with your audience, putting out new things, experimenting with new formats, and finding a way to re-engage your audience again. What I have noticed is, number one, if you are someone that hasn't launched before or hasn't launched in a long time, or maybe you're transitioning into a launch-based model, people need a minute to catch up on that information. And so while you can put together this great launch and it's super creative and it's super fun, sometimes the launch timeline itself isn't enough to get people on board into this new format that you're doing. And it's honestly a wasted opportunity to have leads not convert solely for that reason. At the same time, if you're someone that launches regularly, and I'm talking the minute that you close cart on Friday, you're opening your pre-launch to something else on Monday, people are not being given the chance for them to actually interact with your brand outside of just the launch back-to-back model. And you might be thinking okay, well, I'm a business. I want to sell. I want to make sure that I'm converting. And the answer is yes. But if you do want to build an audience of people who are going to buy from you over and over again, no matter what you put out and when you put it out, if you want to make sure you build an audience of people who are actively engaged in your brand, again, regardless of what you put out, instead of just working on leads to convert into a launch and then have to produce new leads over and over again, I have found that in order for you to retain people's attention and make sure that you can get the most lifetime value out of somebody in terms of conversion is going to be that re-engagement period. So if you're someone, again, who's launching back to back and not giving people a second to breathe, to get to know your brand, to understand how your offers work and all of that, that is a missed opportunity. And also think about the cold leads that might be finding you in the middle of a launch. Maybe they didn't, have enough information to convert during that launch. And instead of you giving them the opportunity to build that trust with them, to storytell, to create that connection, you're going into another launch for that offer. That's a lead that you might be missing out on, not because they're not a good fit, but simply because you didn't give them the chance to engage with your brand. And so I really think a re-engagement period is such a great opportunity to reconnect with your audience, deliver value, for you to get creative again. When was the last time you created content that has nothing to do with the specifics of your offer or whatever bonus you have for your next campaign? So I like to think about about the timeline in terms of where do you think your audience is at. So for example, when I was launching my signature offer for the very first time, I knew that I needed like a full 4 weeks to really just get creative with them, teach them about the model that's coming up, and really kind of like train my audience for what's to come. And after that campaign was done, before going into my next campaign, I knew that they were kind of used to kind of that feeling, that energy, the creativity. So I gave myself about 2 weeks. And again, use this as an opportunity to maybe create new lead magnets. Use this as an opportunity to drive people to your email list because you're sharing something interesting, to story tell and share things that you've never shared with your audience before, to get creative with topics or marketing ideas that you haven't put out yet because you're so into this back-to-back launch mode. So I really think a re-engagement period can really help people feel that they're part of community, they're part of a brand. And again, it can increase the lifetime value of them because they're watching every campaign at a time, because it doesn't feel like you're selling them back to back because of these re-engagement periods. Number 3 is platform personalities. And I've talked about this in terms of omni-channel marketing strategy, where if you are someone that is writing emails, taking those same emails and putting them on as Instagram posts, if you are someone that's creating Instagram posts, taking those exact same posts and putting them out as a blog with no consideration into what the actual platform is, how that platform performs, what people are interested on, how people consume content on that platform, you are wasting your energy and your time, because that is not something that works anymore. So platform personalities really focuses on making each platform or each feature of a platform have a specific goal in mind. Also making sure that with each platform, you can be creative in different ways. And so what that allows is for people to binge your content without feeling like they're reading the same thing over and over again. So for example, if someone is on your email list and they read an email and they're seeing the same thing on your podcast, on your blog, on Instagram, on Facebook, as a reel, they're less likely to engage in all of those other areas as long as they're getting the email from you. Similarly, if there's someone on Instagram who sees that your post is a copy-paste version of your email, they're not going to opt into your email list or read your emails because they know I can just get it on Instagram. And so the purpose of this is to create exclusive content that could feel under that same theme, that same umbrella, but it's tailored to best fit each of those platforms. So if you are someone that is wanting a record-breaking launch and you want to make sure that people are getting the information, they're consuming it, they're really interested in everything you're putting out, you want to make sure that they're binge watching your stuff, binge reading everywhere they go. I'm talking Instagram, email, podcast, your sales page. And the goal is to make sure that each platform has its unique personality and that you can leverage it during a launch. So for example, when I think about my platform personalities for my campaign, I use podcasting or even YouTube a lot to teach my concepts. This is where I share my frameworks, my insights, and I really get into heavy educational mode. However, on Instagram is where I do a lot of storytelling and I focus more on connection. And then an email is where I do a lot of the conversion, a lot of the sales, the direct information, talks about the offers and things like that. But what I've noticed, for example, is if I'm doing the heavy conversion type of material on Instagram, it doesn't necessarily perform as well. And I talked all about that in a separate resource where I shared why launch-specific content doesn't necessarily work on Instagram. But more specifically, then I get to focus on these 3 areas in different ways. And even though they're all selling the offer indirectly in some way, I have found that people will consume our Instagram content, opt into our email list, and still listen regularly to my podcast episodes. And the minute I actually started implementing that strategy, I saw our listenership for our podcast double. And so more people were inclined to listen to our podcast episodes because they knew that was information that they weren't seeing anywhere else anymore. Number 4 is visuals that match the value. I cannot speak on this enough, but sure, sometimes things can work when you're scrappy and putting things together just to get something out there, especially if you're in a phase of just trying to test your offer and see if something like this even works. But I guarantee you there are so many different ways that you can actually test messaging, test data, test strategies that have nothing to do with your visuals. For example, I'm working on selling a brand new offer that I haven't launched before, haven't put out before, even to a niche in my audience that I haven't really tapped into before. But the way that I'm testing it isn't by putting something in Google Docs to sell that program or just getting scrappy and putting DIY pieces of content together. Instead, I actually went on Threads, which is a great way for you to kind of figure out what your audience is thinking, think about where people are resonating the most. And I started putting out messaging based on the offer that I am putting out. And so far, I have gained traction. I'm getting responses. I'm getting people asking questions, not necessarily about the offer, but about the messaging and positioning that I want to utilize for that offer. And so I am using this actually also as a re-engagement re-engagement period to get that information. So that way, when I am ready to put out the offer, even though it's something I haven't put out before, I still want to make sure it's a record-breaking campaign. And for me to do that, I want to make sure my visuals speak to the value. They speak to the price point that I'm charging, they speak to the delivery, they speak to the theme, and most importantly, it's something new, fresh, and interesting. A lot of you are not only not putting any visuals out that speak to the value of the offer, the transformation, the result you're providing, you're also reusing the same visuals over and over again with no consideration into how the industry has evolved in terms of visuals, or the fact that if people alone are seeing that your visuals are the same launch over launch, they're clocking in their mind that this is the same offer with the same messaging, with the same positioning, without anything else. I think a lot about Beyonce's Cowboy Carter album, and if she used the same visuals as her Renaissance album to market that Cowboy Carter album, people will not understand the cultural significance. They will not understand the impact. They will not be replicating this like Western theme. They will not be all in on the album in the same way. And I don't think she would have had a record-breaking impact. Now, would she have gotten some success? Sure, but it wouldn't have been to the best potential and capacity that it is. And so part of creating record-breaking campaigns is having visuals that match the value. So for each record-breaking campaign, your job is to figure out what is the thing that's missing to help me get to that next level. If you are someone that isn't maximizing on each campaign, it will be much harder figuring out what will break your next record. And so you can work on selling from a Google Doc and get maybe 5 clients in or 10 clients in, but you will still have a lot of unresolved data in terms of how your visuals performed, so that you could have gotten 15 people, 20 people, 30 people. You would have had much more data to go off of and actually look into. Another example of this is just magazine covers. A lot of times, even if you don't change the magazine covers, there's no way you would tell the content of the magazine has changed, has evolved, has shifted, whether it's deliverables, whether it's messaging, or whether it's positioning or anything like that. So think about every time that you think about just keeping your campaign up to date, part of that is having visuals that match the value. And then finally, the most important piece, I believe, for a record-breaking campaign to get attention, to spark interest, to re-engage your audience, is the element of exclusivity. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you are someone that launches back to back, or if you are someone that says certain things in their marketing and then doesn't follow through with it. So for example, every time you say that carts are closing on Friday, you decide to randomly extend it an additional 2-3 days, or you say that you're not launching again, or you're not sure when you're launching again, but you have the same launch calendar. I highly recommend that you start taking that out of your messaging and find new ways to make your launches exclusive to your audience. If you are marketing something in a certain way, don't just assume that people don't know, or people won't remember, or people will forget. And the people that won't will actually hold you accountable and start developing a distrust or misconnection with your brand overall. So part of what I like to do in order to keep my campaigns exclusive is, number one, actually follow through with the marketing and messaging that I am putting out. If I say that there are only 2 enrollments a year, I am only holding myself accountable to those 2 enrollments. If I don't hit my income goals or my revenue goals with those 2 enrollments, I find something else to produce. If I'm saying I'm not doing a specific perk or bonus again, I make sure that I follow through with that. And something else to note is exclusivity doesn't just come from messaging and promises that you do in your marketing. It also comes from timeliness. Again, if you are someone that launches your offer 3 to 4 times a year, I highly recommend that you start thinking about what is different about each one of those launches. So when people do miss out on the January launch versus the June launch versus the November launch, they understand what ramifications have in place with that. They understand that this specific bonus or this theme or this messaging or whatever it is only comes in that way. I was speaking to a client the other day, and one of the things I told her is people might not be joining because they know that you're going to open up enrollment again in 2 months. This was someone that launched once a quarter. And so thinking about if that is the problem in terms of urgency, if launching is not creating that urgency for them, thinking about what else is going to create that element of urgency, of exclusivity. And again, this is where visuals, this is where a campaign theme, this is where a re-engagement period can all tie back into that. But overall, a record-breaking campaign includes these 5 components. And at the same time, if you saw a theme with all of them, it is creativity. It is not enough to just simply do the sales activities on your calendar and then know that there's a record-breaking launch in place. You have to actually start making time for creative activities, for creative ideas, and start thinking about creative ways that your campaign can be brought to life, especially if you're someone that launches repeatedly or has a launch-based business model.